Everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm excited today to share with you how to make this necklace collar. It's hard to get it all in one screen and have it sit nicely because it's a little bit big. It's a 16-inch necklace collar. I'm also going to show you how to make an extender chain that you can attach to the back, so that way you can make it longer if you want, or you can make it shorter and just attach it to a ribbon or something like that. But the necklace, for this portion, we're going to be using 5 different types of seed beads. We're going to be using Tilas. We are going to be using, which for the Tila color, I am using the Tila Matte Transparent Dark Topaz. We're going to be using SuperDuos, and I'm using the Roseline Capri Gold. And those are the two that you're going to see the most. You can hang down different things for fringe. I'm using Rizos. You could use drops. That's kind of up to you. You can change it up and even use daggers or use something a little bit longer if you want to. For the Rizos, I am using the gold Roseline for those. And then we're also going to be using size 8 and size 11 seed beads. I am using a matte tea rose silver lined, and I'm also using, for my 11-0, I'm using a gilded gold opal color in the 11-0. In addition to our 5 types of seed beads, to do this, you're going to need some Wildfire beading thread. I'm using 0.006 in a green color. You could go white or green for these either way. Depending on your colors is going to depend on what color thread you want to work with. I'm using size 10 English beading needles here. I'm going to also be touching on with some super glue. I'm using some scissors or a thread burner. And then for my clasp, like I said, for the clasp I'm going to be using an extension chain that I'm going to make, and this one here that I've already put together uses some of our new O beads as well, but you can really use any of the beads that you're working with, so you don't need to get another tube. And I'm going to be using one of our cup buttons to do the clasp enclosure to make it an extendable necklace. We'll put that right at the end of the necklace chain. So hopefully you enjoy this video, and we'll get working. It's really quickly moving. You're doing some repetitive steps, and even though it looks very complicated, you'll get done rather quickly using your 5 different types of seed beads. So to start out this project, I've laid out my Tilas, my 11s, and my 8s, and I'm going to be using about 6 feet of beading thread. You're going to end up needing more than that 6 feet of beading thread, but I really don't like to work with more than 6 feet because it's so much thread to pull through each time. I'd rather add thread on. I'm going to start with a bead that's not part of my project, and that's going to be a stop bead. That's going to go right at the end of my project, and I am going to leave myself a fair amount of a tail so that way I can make that extender chain loop. And I'm going to leave myself right about 10 inches of tail. I put my stop bead on, and I'm running my needle away from the tail towards the long piece of thread 2 times. I like to use a bead that doesn't match whatsoever, so that way it's not confused in the project. After I have that stop bead on, I'm going to get ready to start my pattern, and I'm going to start my pattern with my 11-0 beads. I'm going to use 2 11-0s, and those are going to drop down right next to my stop bead. After I have my 2 11-0s, I'm going to start my pattern of 8-0s. For the 8-0s, what I'm always going to do is, to get a right angle look, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a cheat right angle. I'm putting 4 seed beads onto my needle, letting them drop down next to my 11-0s that are in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle away from the tail end towards the long end, and I'm going back through just the first bead. So just bead number 1 of my 8-0s. When I pull that nice and tight, then it's going to go right next to and form a little loop right next to my 11s. On the other side, I'm going to put 2 11s, and I'm going to pick up a Tila. One thing that you want to pay attention with the Tilas is they actually have 2 sides. They have a flat side, and they have a side that has a little bit of a curvature to it. I'm always picking up my bead so that they sit on the same side with the curve facing up, and I'm going through the top hole. If you happen to put on the beads backwards, no one will notice. It's not that big of a deal. After I have my Tila on, I'm going to repeat the steps of putting on the 11s and my 8s. So again, I'm going to do 2 11s, and then I'm going to do my 4 8s onto my needle. Let them drop down next to my Tila. And then again, needle going away from the stop bead towards the long thread. I'm taking my needle back through just the first 8-0 bead. Pull that nice and tight after each pass to make sure that it fits up right next to the 11s. On go 2 more seed beads, and then a Tila bead. So again, on each side of the Tila, I'm going to have 2 seed beads, and then I'm going to have my 8 rotation. So I'm going to have those on right away. So when you're looking at it, you're always going to have the 2 11s, the 4 8s, 2 11s, Tila, and that's going to constantly repeat the whole 16 inches of the necklace. So you're going to continue this the whole length of the necklace. I'll do one more pass here, and then I'll kind of jump ahead off camera, so that way you don't have to watch me over and over again do the exact same thing. It gets a little boring when you have to watch the same thing for half an hour. So you can pause after this portion, work on yours a little bit, and then come back to the video, just like I'm going to do. Put my beads on. I'm going through, back through that first 8. That tail out of the way here. Pulling it and making sure it goes right down next to the 11s. After the 8s, go 2 11s, and then I pick up one of my Tilas. And I'm dropping that down next to my project. Oops, my tail wants to be part of it here. Pull that out of there before I get too far. And that's the pattern that you're going to have until you get ready to add your next set. The 8s are going to flip up and down and kind of move all around. Once you start adding your next set, you're going to start to get that nice curvature, and they're all going to lay down. So don't worry if you have them up and down. You just want to make sure that you don't see a lot of thread and that have a lot of thread lacking. So you're going to continue this again the whole length of 16 inches. So I'm at the end of adding my first row of my 8s and my Tilas, and just to give you an idea, for the 16 inches I added 28 of my Tila beads. To come down, I'm going to be coming down and attaching to the bottom hole of the Tilas and making sure that those 8s come down. And for this next pass, I'm going to be working with my SuperDuos as well as my 11s. To get to the next row, when I'm coming out one of my 8 beads on my very last row, so after I've circled around, I'm going to pick up one of my 11-ohs, and I'm going to sew down through the 8-0 on the side. That's going to put that bead right in the corner there. I'm going to pick up another 11-0 and sew through the one right along the bottom. When I come out on the other side, I'm going to add another 11-0. And one more yet. After that, I'm going to sew through the bottom hole of the last Tila that I put on. And what that's going to do is create a little bit of a box out of your 8-ohs here. And they've created this box, and then the 11s are kind of on the sides of that box. After I have this corner piece done, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my SuperDuos. Next to my Tilas, I'm always going to put one of my 11-ohs, and then I'm going to put a SuperDuo bead. I'm going to then be sewing through the bottom loop, so the bottom bead of the 8. I pull nice and tight. And what that's going to do is put that SuperDuo right there laying next to my 8 set. After that, I'm going to add another SuperDuo and an 11 and sew through the next Tila. So always on the sides of the 8s are going to be the SuperDuos. next to the Tilas are always going to be 11-0 seed beads. So I'm going to have 2 SuperDuos with 11-0s on the outside in between each of my Tila bead. So again, 11-0, SuperDuo, grab onto the bottom loop of that 8-0 ring, pull that through, add another SuperDuo and an 11, and go through the next Tila. And pull tightly. The bottom section here that we're making is a little bit wider than the top, and that's how we're going to get that curvature to get that nice curve started. So when you're wearing the collar, it sits nicely on your neck and the seed beads don't bunch up on top of one another. It has a nice curve to it. If you do want to change the design a little bit, you do want to figure out the curvature, because that's the big thing with necklaces, is not to get too far before you figure that out. Again, I'm coming out of a Tila, on goes an 11 and a SuperDuo. Go through the bottom hole of the 8 ring. On goes another SuperDuo and an 11. And through the next Tila. So you're just sewing right along the line, adding that second row of beads right along your project. You're going to continue this rotation, adding the 11 SuperDuo through the 8, SuperDuo, 11, Tila. The whole length of that 16 inches. You're going to do that repetition of the 2 SuperDuos with the 2 11s on each side. So I'm coming to the end of my second pass here, adding my SuperDuos, and I'm getting ready to put on my last SuperDuo bead and go through my last Tila. And then what I'm going to do to finish it off on the ends to get ready to do my next one is I'm going to repeat what I did at the start of the necklace. So when I came around and added 11-0 beads in between the 8-0 beads, that's what I'm going to do on this side. So I'm going to start by adding 2 seed beads, just like on the other side. I'm going to go into the bottom hole of my 8-0 seed bead. Next, I'm going to add 1 seed bead, go through the top hole, or the side hole, I'm sorry, of the 8-0 there. I'm going to go through the first seed bead next to the 8, so it would be the second bead that you put on your bracelet or your necklace. I'm also going to go through the 8 and the next 11. Spinning around, I'm going to drop down to my last 8-0 bead that I haven't gone through there. So I've gone around through all 4 8-0s, picking up the 11s on the side. And what I'm going to do is I actually want to come out of this 11, these 2 11s here. So I'm going to go through the 2 11s towards my first Tila. So I've gone around all 4 again of my 8-0s, through 3 11-0s, and now I'm going through my 2 15-0s, or my 2 11-0s that I just put on first in that rotation that are next to the Tila. That's going to get me in position to get ready to add my 3rd row and go on my 3rd pass. My 3rd pass, when I'm adding it, I'm going to be adding another set of my 8-0 beads in the round. I'm also going to be adding my Tila beads as well as some 11-0s. So go ahead and get those in a pile, the Tilas, the 11s, and the 8s. So when you have your beads ready and in a pile, what you're going to do to drop down to this first SuperDuo bead to go through that first hole is pick up 3 of your 8-0 beads, and then you're going to sew through the bottom hole of that last SuperDuo that you put on your project. And that's just going to create a little line of spacing so that way you can kind of connect to the next bead. In between the SuperDuos, I'm always going to stick a Tila, sew through the SuperDuos. When I come out the SuperDuo, I'm going to repeat the pattern that I did up here, where I'm adding 1 seed bead instead of 2 this time, my 4 8-0 beads, taking my needle towards the remainder of the project and going back through just that first 8-0 that I put on. One more seed bead goes on, and I sew through the next duo. Again, another Tila between the SuperDuos, and then underneath the Tilas that are already there from row 1 is when I do the 1 seed bead, 4 8/0s, going back through the first and circling around, again just like we did at the first pass, and 1 more seed bead through the next SuperDuo in line, give it a nice tight pull, and on goes my next Tila. What this is going to do is help to curve the necklace a little bit even more, because you're already getting somewhat of a natural curve from the SuperDuos, and this is going to curve it even more as we get that nice necklace line going as you continue adding your Tilas between your SuperDuos, and then underneath your Tilas your seed bead, 4 8s, and your 11/0. You're going to continue this down that whole length of the 16 inches. So as I'm coming to the end of my row here with my 8s going on, I have my last rotation of 8s. I'm going to stick my last Tila between my 2 SuperDuos. I'm going to twist it here. Give it a little pull. And then to finish off the end here, what I'm going to do is repeat what I did at the beginning, which is add 3 of my 8/0 beads. So I'm going to add 3 of my 8/0 beads. I'm going to go through those 2 beads here at the end, like I did when I came out of them on the other side. And that's going to put me right there on the end. What I'm going to do then is circle around and come back down those 2, back down the 3, and we're going to get ready to do our 4th row with our SuperDuos. So I'm going to spiral around all the beads here, the 8s and the 11s, and then I'm going to come down through those beads as well. So I've gone through all my 8s. I'm going to come back down the 11s here. Come out those. And then I'm going to get ready to start my next row by coming down the 3 that I just added. If you don't like those big 3 on these sides, you can also add 5 11/0s. That will also cover that area right there, that you'll be able to use those and they won't be quite as big. When I'm coming down to the end of my Tila, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 2 of my 11/0s and sew into the bottom hole of the Tila. And then I'm ready, and it just creates a nice little edge going to my 3rd row. For my 3rd row, all I'm going to be using are 11/0s and my Rizos. Again, you can use drops if you'd rather do that, but I'm going to use the Rizos since I have them. And I'm going to do, again, just the 11s and the Rizos, so you can push your other beads out of the way or put them back in the tubes. And this is going to kind of repeat the pattern a little bit with the SuperDuos. All I'm going to be doing is a seed bead next to the Tila, a Rizo on, I'm sewing through the bottom hole, no, I'm sorry, the bottom bead on my 8s. And then coming out so that it's going to hang down there. Next I'm doing another bead on, a Rizo on, and an 11 on. So again, the 11s are going to be right next to my Tilas, and then the Rizos are going to be next to the 8/0s. So 11 goes on, Rizo goes on, through the bottom 8, then opposite, Rizo, 11, through the Tila. And you can see it starting to line up there. And I'm just going to continue doing that the whole length then of the bottom, and that's really going to pull these tilas down nicely and get everything to lay nice and flat right along the necklace with just a little bit of fringe showing. So I'm reaching the end of my line here, and I have my last Rizo that I'm putting on, sewing through my Tila bead. And then what I'm going to do to make up this space here is just like I did on the other side. I'm going to sew on 2 11-0s. I'm going to then sew up those 3 8-0s. And that's going to complete the necklace minus the clasp. So you're going to have your necklace finished at this point and just your clasp to add. And the necklace has a really nice curvature and a really nice lay to it that it's going to lay really, really nicely on the neck. And to finish it, all I'm going to do on the one side that I have my needle attached to, I'm going to follow the line basically to the corner back here to my stop bead. I'm going to go back the 11-0 seed beads, and the 8-0 and the 11-0. I'm just going to get back to my corner here, going through another 8. And then coming out that and going through the first of the 2 11s that I put on. So the very next bead, next to the stop bead, towards the stop bead. At this point I'm going to take the stop bead off. Sometimes you can pull them off, sometimes you need to put a needle on and backtrack them. So I'm just taking that stop bead off here. And I have my 2 threads coming out here. All I'm going to do with those is I'm actually going to tie them off together. So I'm going to take the 2 ends here. I'm just going to tie them. Give it a nice tight pull and another knot. Now you have the 2 knots. I'm going to trim that down and just kind of push it out of the way a little bit. And on this end here, because I have a fair amount of thread left, I'm going to do my loops. The loops I'm going to do are going to be basically an extender loop that's going to allow me to wear my necklace from 16 inches that it is, or the whole way to 20 inches, because I'm going to make, or right about 19 inches, I'm going to make a 3-inch extender chain. I'm just going to use my 11-0s to do my extender chain, as well as a little bit of my 8-0s at my crossing point. So to start out, I'm going to string a large collection of my 11-0s, and I'm going to want these, when I string them on, to be as long, if not a little bit longer, than the button clasp that I'm using. So I have these here, and they're a little bit longer than my button, and they'll fit comfortably over my button from end to end. Next, I'm going to put on one of my 8-0 beads, and then I'm going to continue with this count. So I have 16 11-0s here that are going to go around my cup button. I'm going to drop my 8-0 on, and I'm going to do another rotation of 16 beads. After I have these 16 beads on, I'm going to do another one of my 8-0s. Drop that down as well, and one more rotation of 16 beads. And that's going to make 3 loops. After I have those 3 groups of 16 on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add again another one of my 8-0s. I'm going to do 16 more beads down this side. And I'm going to go to the second to last 8-0 that's on here, and I'm going to sew back in the opposite direction. and pull tightly. And what that's going to do is that's going to make my first loop. Just want to make sure that my button fits through there comfortably, but not too big. And there I have it. Next I'm going to do another group of 16. And then I'm going to pick up the first 8/0 that I put on. I'm going to sew back through that one as well. And that's going to make my next loop that I can go into. Lastly, another 16 beads go on. And the other side will be much easier because all you have to do is attach the clasp to it. And then once I have those on there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through the 8/0 that's there on the corner. So you're picking up that corner 8/0, and I'm going to use that as my connector bead for my first loop of my extender chain. I'm going to reinforce this whole entire thing, and it also looks nice if you do peyote the whole loop long. And I'm going to reinforce it, like I said, going through the whole thing multiple times. If you do want to do a peyote stitch, you can do the peyote stitch right along here as you're reinforcing it. That'll reinforce it nicely. You just want to keep track to whichever side you come up, that you want to come down the opposite. This is a nice thing to put on to necklaces. You can even stick one on bracelets. With bracelets, I wouldn't make it quite as long because it's going to be annoying hanging down. But all I'm doing is sewing through again, back down that whole grouping of 16. Once I get the whole way down to the base of my project, I am going to tie off my thread, and then I'm going to attach my button on the other side. And I'll show you a simple way how to do that as well. And again, the button that I'm using is the cup button, and that's a button that we had manufactured and produced in the Czech Republic. Right now we have it in 6 colors, and we have more on their way and coming. And it's that curved button. Okay, and I'm back to the start here. Right along my project, you can see my button will fit nicely in my loops without it being too big, and it'll grab on wherever I need it to sit. And this one will just hang down the back of your neck just a tiny little bit. If you want to, you can weight it down too by sticking a bigger bead on the end. You just need to make sure that you can still get your button in. I'm going to bring my thread back along my project and tie off a couple places and glue as well, and then flip over and get ready to attach the button on the other side of my necklace. When you get to the other side here, you want to add thread, or what I did was I actually had enough thread to sew the entire length of my necklace right along the top again, and I pulled that the whole way back to the other side. It also reinforced it a little bit, which is kind of nice. But I'm coming out of one of my 8/0 beads here at the end, the very last 8/0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 of my 11s and an 8. Then I'm going to sew through the back of my cup button. When I come out the top of my cup button, I'm going to add one of my 8 size 8 beads and then sew down through the cup button as well. On the other side here, I'm going to add another one of my 8s. So I have an 8 below, an 8 on top, and another 8 below. And then I'm going to add, again, 3 more 11s. I'm going to sew through that 8/0 that I was coming out of, going from the end that I started the needle on towards the other end. So that way it's just going to make a little hump like that. I'm going to reinforce that clasp by going back through everything that I just sewed through. And that's going to make it nice and tight too, and a little bit more secure, since your area of tension is always where your clasp is. If you want to, you can even go through a third time. That's kind of up to you. What I'm going to do then is, after I've come through 2 times, is I'm going to sew down through my project a little bit, and I'm going to knot off my thread, picking up some of the threads there in the middle, just doing half hitch knots or sewer's corner knots, and just sewing a little bit, tying another knot by making a loop and sewing through it, and sewing through a couple more beads and doing the same. I do this along the base of my project. You can do it at the top or the bottom. Because I fed my thread the whole way along the top, I decided to do this at the bottom. Give a nice tight knot. So I've done 3 knots along the edges there. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go in with my glue now. And I'm going to touch on those spots where I tied the knots. So you need to remember where you did that. You don't want to use too much glue. Just a nice little dab. If you're using the super new glue and your bottle is rather new, you just kind of touch it to it. You don't even squeeze it at all. I'm also going to go back to where I added thread and just do a little touch there. Then I'm going to go to the end here where I tied off my thread and do a little touch there. And I like to blow on it. And what that does is it kind of spreads the glue out a little bit. If you get too much glue, you can always just touch it on your bead mat and then pull it up right away. I like to hold my project either up as I'm drying or make sure that the wet portions are not sitting on my bead mat. That way it doesn't stick to the bead mat. It's kind of depressing when you have bead mats stuck to your necklaces. And then I'm just going to trim down after that glue dries. I'm going to trim down all my edges here. Or you can use your burner. It's up to you. Either way works. I usually trim and then I burn. I tend to use both tools. I'm going to find my ends there. And I'm going to trim those off as well. And the ends here in the middle are from where I had to add thread. Because altogether this project uses about 8 feet of thread. Once you have your sections tied off and the glue's dried, then you have your necklace completed. And I did this one in the light colors. I apologize, it was a little bit harder to see, but I did it in the light colors so that way it was making me think of spring since it's cold and raining outside. And this one here that I did the other night as my prototype is in some of the more fallish colors of the turquoises and golds. So you can do it in either section. Like I said, it's going to drape around your neck really, really nicely and have that nice curvature to it. The nice thing about this necklace that I just did, again, it has that extension chain. You can put it on there and wear it at that place if you want. At 16 inches, 17.5, or at the 19-inch mark. So you can wear it at any distance, and that way it does give you some varieties if you're wearing it with a dress or a shirt that is a little bit lower or has a little bit higher of a collar line. So hopefully you enjoyed this very, very simple and easy necklace. It's a great collar using the Tilas and the SuperDuos. I'm calling it the Super Tila collar necklace since it's using both and it has the Rizos there. Again, you can change out if you don't have the Rizos. If you'd like to, you can comment and we'd love to hear your suggestions, your comments. You can also check us out on the web at potomacbeads.com. Go to our locations page. You can visit our different stores to get your materials and to take classes from the instructors there. Or you can watch the rest of our YouTube videos and shop online at thebeadco.com if you don't live near one of our locations. So thanks a lot for watching, and please enjoy playing with all these fun seed beads and making a nice, simple, elegant collar necklace.